You're listening to Geeks Unleashed.
A podcast that covers what's current in the world of pop culture.
I'm Mark Brassington, and I'm in London.
And I'm Jasmine in Texas.
Hello, welcome to Geeks Unleashed. This is episode 64.
If you are not already subscribed, you can find us at Geeks Unleashed everywhere, including your favorite podcast platform. Remember, 5-star reviews help us get found by more listeners, so please rate and review Geeks Unleashed on Apple or Podchaser.
And I'm Mark.
I'm Jasmine.
And this week we are reviewing Donny Cates' Crossover Volume 1, which is the first 6 issues.
And spoiler warning, this is a review show, so if you have not had a chance to read Volume 1 of Crossover, and it is a lot of fun. So you might want to pause this and come back later because we're ruining all of it.
Before we jump into any news and reviews, we kind of wanted to have a chat with you, Mr. Listener and Mrs. Listener, or inclusive, they. So including everybody, they, he, she, you name it, whoever's listening to us right now, we kind of just want to be all inclusive.
Aliens, dogs, cats, birds,
superheroes,
one-eyed, one-eared, flying purple people eaters, everybody.
It's fucking throwing me off now. Anyway, we kind of wanted you to grab a cup of brew, grab a coffee, grab a tea, grab a beer, do what you got to do, smoke your cigarette, have a little chat with us for a minute. Well, the chat is kind of between me and Jasmine. You just pretend you're joining in.
Yeah.
And we kind of wanted to talk to you about Geeks Unleashed. So don't worry, we're not going anywhere. But we've been doing this over a year now. It's been a long time.
Yep. We've picked up a few things along the way.
We've kind of, in the last 6-8 weeks, we've been kind of dropping things and changing things. Mm-hmm. And we kind of wanted to have a talk to you about why we're doing it and what we're doing. And we're going to tease you with some things as well. We're going to tell you what we've ditched. What's the first thing we ditched, Jasmine?
We got rid of the recommendations.
So at the end of every episode, we had recommendations. We realized after a while we'd made a rod for our own back. It was like a third review.
Yes.
And sometimes I didn't have anything to recommend.
Yeah, because it was always something like, hey, what else did you do this week that we're not covering on the podcast? But then we started to get busier and realized I didn't really do anything else this week to recommend.
So with work, lives, friends, family, and also having 2 things to review every week and news, we were like, crap. And I think I just said to Jasmine one day, can we just drop this recommendation thing? And the recommendation thing happened by accident. We'd never planned to have the recommendations. We just had them.
But I think at the very beginning, it's because we were really excited. So we would pick the 2 things that we were talking about, but we were also like, oh, we should have done this.
And I guess it was like having our own corner of the show.
Right.
So, but we've kind of built in sometimes that when we have a bit of our intro chat, like, oh, what'd you do this week? But we prefer that because actually the recommendation is what did you like? Like, you have to recommend something. But this week, if I want to say, for instance, I watched a movie earlier today on Netflix, which I did. I watched a serial killer documentary, which I've forgotten the name of.
Oh, was it the one about Ireland?
The tape one, the tapes. Oh crap, that's going to annoy me. But anyway, I watched it today. Would I recommend it? Only if you like serial killers. But did I enjoy watching it? I found it interesting, but it's a lot of. Actually, they didn't really show too many horrible things, but they did have a particular moment in there which I found very disturbing. Well, actually, there were several disturbing moments in there, but one particular that really was uncomfortable with me. But would I recommend it? I'm not sure. It would depend on the listener. If you're okay with horrible serial killer type stuff, go watch it. But if you like My Little Pony,
for all those true crime fans.
Yeah. So but that's kind of why we dropped it. We thought actually what we can do is more in the intro, how's your week been? We can say, how's your week been? Did you do anything extra? It doesn't have to be new. It doesn't have to be TV or movies. It could be I went to a museum.
Yeah.
Well, maybe when we're all allowed out. We're slow. We're all slowly being allowed out. Anyway, the other thing we ditched, or you may have noticed that we have been ditching, is God, Jasmine.
Oh, 2 reviews an episode. Yeah, that was a lot of work, guys. I mean, that was a lot of homework for us.
So how the show, the concept, how this show was conceived, and before we ever had our first episode, was I used to listen to a podcast which is finished. It's two English girls. It was called Seriously, and it had no vowels in it. And I really liked the style of it. They used to do 3 reviews, and they kept them quite short, and it was all within an hour. I liked the style of it. Now, those 2 girls at the time, I believe, were working in media, working in the sort of the pop culture entertainment industry. So they probably were reading and watching things as part of their job. So that made doing a podcast for them probably a lot easier than it is for us who have full-time jobs.
Yes.
So that's kind of what the inspiration for Geeks Unleashed was in terms of the format. We don't review the same type of things that they review. Sometimes they used to review things like the Great British Bake Off, which I would never even watch. But I liked the format of 3 things an episode. So I was like, actually, that's quite nice. It's kind of 3 different things, like, and for our interpretation of it, it was anime, comics, whatever. And then as life happened, like Jasmine said, it became very, very hard to do 2 things a week. Now, we're not
like if we're doing a season of a show on Netflix and a graphic novel, it's like, God, 7 episodes of TV to watch plus 6 issues of a comic to read in the same week.
So it kind of changed around Sweet Tooth. So we did initially. Jasmine was like, "Whoa, you want me to read how many?" But actually, we read them. I read all of them within like an hour.
Yeah, it was a pretty easy read.
It was actually, again, it was because it was an easy read.
Yeah.
And then the following week we did the TV show, and we're like, actually, we said to each other, we like this, but also because we're just concentrating on one thing, we're able to sort of get underneath the skin of it a little bit more, have a deeper conversation.
Yeah, I don't know about the listeners, but I definitely feel like the conversations have gotten better since we did that.
Yeah, but we're not cramming like when we did the Castlevania. We felt like we were really cramming in a whole season into a 20-minute review, where now we can maybe have an hour, maybe sometimes 50 minutes, 45 minutes, which actually is a lot more entertaining. But also because of the format, it's allowed us to have a few more guests come on. So because we're not making them go and do 2 reviews, we're like, look, do you want to jump on and do Black Widow? Yep, I want to do Black Widow. Like, so brilliant, so I think that's kind of quite nice. So so anyway, that's why we stopped. Now, doesn't mean that we've stopped everything. So kind of wanted to talk you through what we're doing, what the new format's going to look like, and I'm going to tease you with something. So so what we're not going to call this show Geeks Unleashed Weekly or GU Weekly, but this is kind of how I view it, as Geeks Unleashed Weekly in my mind. So first 3 weeks of each month, or 4 weeks if it's a 5-week month, will be news of the week. That's not going anywhere. We're still keeping the news. We love the news. Also, me and Jasmine just love to catch up and chat shit. And, but then we're going to have our one review. So that's going to be something, again, graphic novel. We keep threatening to do video games, but you never know. We'll definitely be doing Horizon Zero Dawn 2, like 100%. So, but yeah, graphic novels, TV. We'll do a whole TV show. Like when we used to do TV shows before, it was like 3 episodes, but we'll do like a whole one. When I say a whole one, we're not going to do 27 episodes of Grey's Anatomy. Season 19. Don't worry.
Season 38.
We're going to be keeping it within our realms of pop culture, like you might, I don't know, Stargirl season 2 or whatever it is. I'm just spitballing here. So we're going to do like Sweet Tooth, and we're going to just concentrate on that. So that's kind of how we're doing it. But then our last week of the month, we're kind of going to make that like our conversation episode. Now that might sometimes be just an interview or a conversation with someone, or it might be that we do a bit of a collaboration, which we've got an idea for October of a 5 or 6 way conversation on a particular subject. So we might invite a few people on. It could be that we do a 5 or 6 person type review, but it's going to be our collaborative episode. The conversations are going to be, interviews, but they've got a conversation or 2. So, and we've got a really cool one coming up next week that you're going to enjoy listening with one of our favorite YouTubers. So stay tuned for that at the end of this episode, as we'll tell you who they are. However, we are also working on something in the background. We're not going to tell you now, but
it's a secret.
It is a secret. It's not going to be a secret for long. In about 10 to 15 days, we might tell you about it. So stay tuned. And but we're really excited. We're working on it in the background. We're going to carry on working on it, and when it's ready, it's going to be a deeper conversation, shall we say?
Yeah.
But what's one thing that's not going to change, Jasmine?
Listen, whether he's listening or not, we're not giving up Stephen Fox. Okay,
yeah,
Stephen is going to continue to come back monthly and hang out with us. And if he refuses, we're going to call his wife and we're going to be like, "Can we borrow Stephen? You remember when you were a kid and you go like knock on the neighbor's door, like, hey, can so and so come out to play?" We're definitely keeping Stephen around. So don't worry, guys.
So Stephen, who comes on here every now and again, is still hanging out with us. We're not getting rid of him. He hasn't been on for about a month, so he's due a return. He's due a return soon. So don't worry, we'll strong arm him back in. But yeah. He is the official third Geeks Unleashed crew member. So. Yes. Anyway, that's all done, but we kind of wanted to have that conversation with you. So you can put your cigarette out now, go get your coffee refill as we jump into this week's versus. So Star-Lord versus Star-Lord. And when we're talking Star-Lord versus Star-Lord, we're talking Chris Pratt Star-Lord versus, Peter Quill Star-Lord versus the What Ifs T'Challa. So, so I know you caught up with What If this week. We won't talk about the episodes per se right now because we're going to do that another time. But what were your impressions of T'Challa versus Peter Quill?
At first, I was like, well, this will be interesting to see, because I didn't expect the T'Challa version of Star-Lord to be so like sweet and charming. So I loved it. Like, so I definitely voted for T'Challa Star-Lord because I liked the world that he was in as well. So, that's kind of cheating, but like anybody that can make Thanos like smile, I think you're okay in my book.
I definitely preferred the T'Challa Star-Lord. I would vote for him. However, my only concern would be that world is what the fuck happened to Captain America, Thor, and what is going to happen now Ego's rocked up. So I think what they're trying to say is just okay, T'Challa was an overall nice guy. He's managed to do a lot of good. However, I think we need Peter Quill. And it could be that we need Peter Quill because we needed T'Challa back on Earth. So
if you really want to get technical, it's Peter Quill's fault that Thanos got the snap in the first place. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no one's perfect. That bit is the worst part. However, if you didn't get that, you didn't get Infinity War and Endgame. Well, you didn't finish Infinity War and get Endgame. Anyway, so in terms of this week's winner, it was clear from the comments that T'Challa was the favorite Star-Lord.
Oh yeah. Our favorite prince and future king of Wakanda was a much better Star-Lord than Star-Lord himself. So yeah. That one was almost like a no contest. It wasn't like a complete landslide, but it was very, very, very one-sided.
Yeah, it was definitely slam dunk T'Challa's favorite. The only thing I'd be concerned about is the future of that world that they're on. So I don't think Ego's showing up to take his son from the flipping takeaway
from the Dairy
place.
Queen.
Yeah, wherever it was. Yeah, the little
burger joint.
Fast food place. Yeah, burger joint. Yeah, the fast food place, whatever you want to call it. So I think he's about to become fast food himself. So anyway, jumping into this week's news. It's a little bit old, but we didn't talk about it last week. So Substack. James Tynion is leaving Batman and the Joker for Substack, essentially.
I know you are so bummed about that because every chance you get to talk about Batman books, like you bring up Tynion. So I'm sorry that you have lost this.
So I see this in two ways. Like, obviously, this is good news for Tynion. Like, he's getting that ciabatta. He's getting as our boys at Paperbacks and Soundtracks love to call it. He's getting the cash. So I imagine being in his shoes right now must be brilliant. Like he was but here's actually his quote. So from his newsletter, I was trying to make one of the most difficult decisions of my professional life. DC had presented me with a 3-year renewal of my exclusive contract with the intent of me working on Batman for the bulk of that time. I was grateful for the offer, but I couldn't help but look at the success of my creator-owned titles and wonder if it was the right choice. And then I received another contract, the best I've ever been given in a decade as a professional comic book writer a grant from Substack to create a slate of original comic book properties directly on their platform that my co-creators and I would own completely, with Substack taking none of the intellectual property rights or even publishing rights. Given my bandwidth, I knew I could only pick one of two sitting in front of me. So, I mean, let's be honest, there's a couple of things here. Substack, I mean, let's talk about the two offers. He's given two offers. One of them is to write work for DC, who will get the lion's share of anything he creates. This, when he creates new characters that potentially could be used in movies or TV shows. From what we're all very aware how badly creators get paid from their work or characters being used in media. Yes, okay, you might get,
but you get the audience.
Yeah, I mean, you do get an audience, and let's be honest, most people writing Batman would probably never want to leave. Same with things like Spider-Man, and those are big titles to sit on. The recognizability, I get that, and having a contract put in place in front of you, where James Tynion right now is one of the most highest profile writers in the comic book industry right now. I mean, he's not the only one, but he's one of at least 10 high profile writers, and to be sitting in front of a contract where you've been given two and Substack are going to pay you more, I can see why he went for it. Like he's got the option between the two, and let's be honest, he's a man, like he's not a machine. He knows what he's capable of, so he's like, okay, look, I'm going to go with Substack because Substack are going to give me more cash. And also the deal here that Substack will take zero cut. Like, that is crazy to me.
Well, not zero cut. They won't take any of the characters. Like, they will have no ownership of whatever he puts on Substack.
Yeah. I mean, but also they won't have any future property rights or publishing rights. So if he takes that medium to Netflix or Amazon or HBO or wherever he goes with it, they don't get a cut, which is crazy. That's what I meant, like future cut.
Yeah.
So I think that was probably a little bit silly of them, like to not put, because obviously they're giving him a grant. And obviously they'll get some income via their platform.
Right.
So, because obviously they're not going to do it for free. They're not charity. But they're hoping that more people will come to their platform. And hopefully, I'm assuming what they're hoping is more people will come to their platform and think, if I'm signing up for Tynion, I'm also signing up for, I don't know, like you said, you purchase a Substack subscription. So,
I do.
Like, yeah. So, with,
but it's journalism. It's a journalism subscription, right?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, there's other people go to that platform. When you go to your journalism one, do you ever see other people's as well and think, No,
because the way that this one in particular works is I signed up through her directly. She had like the Substack link and everything on her website, and it comes to my email as a newsletter. I don't have to go to Substack at all. So it comes to me every time she releases a new issue. It's to me, it's like an amalgamation of both Kickstarter and Patreon, because you buy into it, but you can also buy into the Substack stuff at like levels. So if you're paying this much, then you get access to exclusive content. And this writer in particular, she does like book clubs, and if you do the book club, then you get to go to a Zoom with everybody else, and she has like weekly chat sessions and that kind of stuff. So you get to be a little bit more interactive. She has like a free version as well. Obviously the free version doesn't have access to those things, so it's like you're buying into the exclusivity of it. But to me, it feels like Kickstarter. Like, Kickstarter is just the platform for you to be able to get your product out there to people. And once it's done, then it's your responsibility to keep people. It's not Substack's responsibility to keep your viewership. So I think that it makes sense, like from a Substack point of view, because you're interested in the upfront, everything that comes with it. And as far as retention, that retention is the individual user's problem. Or the creator's problem, rather.
I think my only problem with this is, so he'll be creating creator-owned content, and however, there's other creators that have also announced, like Hickman's going on there, and other people. But if you think about it, people are fans of Tynion, but they're probably, they could probably fans of Hickman and other people, So if you're paying, so Tynion said the basic ground level is $7. So $7 a month, that is. And if you're paying $7 a month for just Tinian, but you're also a fan of 3 or 4 other creators, suddenly you're looking at $40 or $50 a month. And that all adds up. So, and the other trouble with that is if you pay just $7 a month and Tinian's busy that month and he can't send you anything, you've just paid $7 a month for nothing. And my problem with a lot of this is I don't see a future for this comics in Substack. Like, I just don't, because you're paying for a newsletter and maybe some work if they've got round to it, like, and how regularly is this work going to come out? Like, if it's a 6-issue miniseries that he's putting out, what happens after month 6? Like,
well, but if he owns the rights to these things, then he can try to option those rights to someone else, right? Like, he's done his 6-month exclusive Substack run, then he can take his property and shop it around and say, hey, Image, hey, you want to buy into this?
No, but what I'm saying is that's great for him, but as the person, the customer, I'm saying, like, if I'm a fan of Tinian, which I am, I love Batman, I love Something That's Killing the Children. I haven't unfortunately gone and picked up a couple of other things like Department of Truth and Nice House on the Lake, which are things I do want to read. But if you're a fan of his work like that, which I am, do I want to jump on to paying $7 a month for essentially a newsletter and a PDF? No, not really. Like, I'd rather pay $7 a month and go and get caught up on Department of Truth and actually have the physical product on my hand. So I don't particularly see a future with this. But the other thing is Substack don't have a reader. Like, they don't have a comic book reader like Comixology have an app. Right. So that's where I see a bit of a downside for this. Do you want a newsletter PDF, or I don't know if it is going to be a PDF.
Yeah, but if you think about it that way, a PDF is universal. I don't have to download shit. Like, it requires zero work on my part.
Yeah, no, I know. But I think where Substack's missing the whole thing of this is I'm a collector as well as a fan. I like to have the physical item. I know not everybody does, but also if you think about it, with certain comics popularity, and not even necessarily if it's gone up in value, sometimes you can just resell your comic for the same price you bloody bought it for. I can't resell a PDF. So I don't know. So I'm seeing his point of view. He's had a fantastic contract put in front of him from Substack. So good on him for taking it, and good on him for being gutsy enough to say, I'm dropping Batman and the Joker, and good on him for taking that money there, because I'm sure as fire anything, this Substack grant money isn't going to be there forever for these comic book creators. So good on them for taking it now.
Well, yeah, a grant is one and done. But okay, so let me ask you, if you ever contribute to a Kickstarter, do you always opt for paying more money for the physical things?
So when Kickstarter first came around, I used to always do the physical. I probably I want to say like once or twice did I just do the PDF because it was someone I was a fan of, but that was a one-off payment. I didn't have to do a monthly contribution. Right. So I would definitely not be a fan of a monthly contribution. No, not at all.
For digital?
Yeah, for digital, no. I wouldn't want to sign up something where I'm getting a digital thing for $7 a month. That's not something I see myself doing. I could see myself paying $7 a month for maybe a creator where the medium is audio or visual or something like that. Like, well, like a podcast. I could see myself kicking in for that, but yeah. I wouldn't be overly a fan of kicking in for a PDF, especially when I know that eventually these things are going to get printed. And if I'd rather just go and buy the book. So that's my thoughts. Yes. Okay. So the Batman thing. So Batman, was final issue is 117 in November, and the Joker, his final issue is issue 14 in April. He's got no other plans for other superhero stuff. He's literally just going completely indie, which is, I mean, if you look at the success of people like Robert Kirkman, I don't blame him. So I don't blame him for taking this deal. I'm just saying I'm not particularly a fan of the PDF and this subscription model, especially if I like different creators, which I do. I don't really want to jump onto this subscription service. I've got enough subscriptions going on, without signing up for individuals. Well, imagine if Netflix said, right, okay, we're going to stop doing monthly subscription to the whole of Netflix. What you can do is sign up for the directors that you like instead. Imagine that. Like, so you could only see parts of Netflix just for the directors you like.
Netflix is tiered though. Like you can't you can choose not to pay for HD. You can choose not to pay for other users. So
no, it's not tiered as in content restriction though. Like, I mean, you can pay for the ground level and you still get all the content that's available
in your region.
Well, yeah, in your region. Okay, yeah. I mean, that's a different conversation. Okay, let's just focus on your region in America. I'm just saying, hypothetically, if they said, right, we're going to change the model that now you just pay per director, yes, in your region, like you're going to pay now, rather than $7 a month for the whole thing, you're just going to pay $7 a month for the directors that you like.
Not for Netflix, but I do pay for 3 different anime services because I cannot get everything that I want on just one. So do I pay the same amount of money each month for 2 different services, but I'm only watching one TV show on one service, but I still pay for it every month? Yes, I do.
Yeah, I meant more like if they broke it up, because obviously each one of those anime services, though, you probably have multiple TV shows and movies within them, I'm assuming.
But it's the same principle. Like I literally have High Dive because I needed to watch a season of Haikyuu that I could not get on Funimation or Crunchyroll. And I was like, well, shit, I got to get High Dive too so I can watch this one show.
Yeah, but then you probably canceled it after you've watched it.
Well, I mean, I didn't. I could have, but I did. I paid into a service for one specific thing, and I don't use that service for anything else.
Okay, well, I would have cancelled it. I would, if I had to do it. If I had to do it for that one particular thing, I would have cancelled it after I'd watched it.
Yeah.
So,
to play devil's advocate, it makes sense to me. I think like if you're going to leave the bread and butter, like if you're going to leave the big 2, there has to be some kind of something to compensate for the salary that you're losing for having been with such a big publisher. So the only way to make up for that is some sort of subscription model.
I just can't see me like wanting to sign up for multiple creators. That's where
I don't see it working well for this industry. I think Substack is a good fit for a lot of other things, but I don't necessarily know that it's going to be good for comics.
No, I agree. Yeah. So let's leave that there. But that was a good conversation about Substack and our different thoughts. I'm pro digital for TV. I actually don't know if I'm pro digital for music. I think the convenience of it's good, but I've actually recently been reflecting on this. Like, I don't know about you, but when you were younger, when you were a little kid, like, no, I remember when I was like 10 or something, having a Walkman and tapes.
Oh yeah.
And like, I used to love the idea of just getting an album and like rinsing that album to death and knowing every single
I used to sit there and read the lyrics in the cover while the CD was playing. Yes.
So, like, I remember like Green Day Dookie. I knew every flipping word to every song in that album. And like, you know, I used to like just Michael Jackson tapes. I used to have Green Day tapes. I used to have I bloody had the Dirty Dancing soundtrack. Like, you know, like, and it was great. Also, you could just take the radio if you really wanted, like the top 40.
Oh man, tape it on the radio. Oh wow.
But what I'm saying is, you can, because of that, because the thing with digital music is there's just so much of it.
Yeah,
I honestly get lost now. Like, so I have been. I'm not going to go back to tapes, but you know, I used to love my mini disc player. Like, I never had a portable CD player, but I had a mini disc player and a tape player. But what I'm trying to say is, I don't like the digital format with music because I just think there's way too much of it, and it doesn't allow you to actually get into the album and into the lyrics because it's just so much of it. I used to have a record player in my bedroom, like, and that's something I've been thinking about getting back into, is getting vinyl again.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about stepping away from the music subscription that I have. And I don't, by the way, when I say music subscription, I tend to only do the deals. So I did like the one I'm on at the moment is where I paid £10 for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And normally then I end it and then I wait for the next deal. But I actually really want to go back to like vinyl and just actually having albums and just getting back into it. But with TV and movies, I honestly don't care about digital. I am not interested in owning endless amounts of DVD and Blu-ray box sets. I honestly have no interest in that at all. I used to have shelves of them, and then I sold loads of them, and I was like, actually, do you know what? Netflix, Amazon, whatever, we've got other things over here like Sky Now and stuff like that you can watch anything digital. But I'm not interested in owning box sets. It's not for me, not anymore. But comics is the one thing that I'm very anti-digital. Like, I like to have a physical copy. I will read digital, even for things like mainly for reviews. But I would like to have the physical thing in my hand. That's probably the only old school thing I've kept is having a paper copy.
Yeah.
I'm
the same way. I like books. I keep a ton of books, like novels, and most recently I've started reading manga. So I love books. I don't see myself not buying physical books anymore. Now, of course, I still put stuff on my Kindle, but like the stuff that I put on my Kindle is the stuff that I'm taking a chance on, right? Like this digital book is $2.99, like for $3. Like, if I don't like it, I don't feel like I've lost anything versus spending $25 on a hard copy book.
Well, my daughter, I was going to say, my daughter had to read a book the other day for school, and it was £5 for the paperback and £1 for the Kindle ebook. And I was like, okay, I'm paying £1. I was like,
right.
I was like, here's my Kindle, like, just read the book. Yeah. She did moan the whole way through because it was the first book she'd ever read digitally.
Yeah.
And she was like, I prefer paperback. I was like, yeah, but I wasn't paying £5 for the paperback when I could pay £1 for the digital, considering you'll never read it again as it's at school. And she actually hated the whole book the whole way through. I was like, well, I'm glad I definitely didn't get paperback. So anyway, we'll bring our digital versus conversation to an end. I think we've all got, to be honest, everyone's got different views on paperbacks.
I mean, like, I'm digital everything else. Like, everything else I'm totally fine with digital, but like my books, I don't want to get rid of my books.
Oh yeah, no, to be honest, I'm slowly reducing my single issues, monthly comic issues. And I mean, recently managed to get a hard copy of first 20 issues of Saga and the first 30 issues of Why the Last Man. And I'm actually really liking the fact that I've got some nice hardbacks of some of these graphic novels. And I think I could see myself diving into the graphic novel world a little bit more. So anyway.
All right. So moving on, we've got some HBO news coming in. So earlier this year, HBO, surprising to a lot of people, canceled Lovecraft Country after just one season. And then, of course, the Emmy nominations came out and Lovecraft Country picked up 13 Emmy nominations. So, hey, go figure. But Misha Green, who was the producer and showrunner for Lovecraft Country, is working on a Black Canary film with Jurnee Smollett for HBO. So we could be getting a follow-up film to Birds of Prey, starring one of the Birds of Prey characters. So I'm excited because I really, really liked her canary in that movie.
Jurnee has now confirmed it on Twitter as well. So she has the cat's out of the bag, basically. So yeah. It's definitely happening. The only thing I'm disappointed is it's going on HBO Max, so no theater release.
I think that could be in their favor. I mean, if it comes down to like, here's the deal, we're going to make a movie, but we're only going to make this movie if we can release digital instead of a theatrical release. Like, I have access to HBO Max, but like, I would rather them make the movie than not make the movie.
Well,
if that was the bottom line.
If it's okay, you can only make it if it goes on HBO Max. Well, I'm glad they're making it. Like, I 100%. Like, if it was HBO Max or no deal, then make the movie. But what I'm saying is, why not just even stick it in a 2-week release only, like, limited theatrical release? Or maybe they will. Maybe they will do it. Well,
they did that with Wonder Woman, where it was on HBO Max for 30 days, and then it was exclusive to movie theaters after that. And then at 60 days after that, it was back to HBO Max or something like that.
I was thinking, like, and I know it was terrible, but the Inhumans TV show from ABC, but they released the 2-hour pilot in some cinemas for like 2 weeks or something like that. And so maybe, Black Canary, why don't just stick it in cinemas for, like, say, 2 weeks if you are just trying to push HBO Max.
Yeah.
I mean, release it at the same time, put it on HBO Max, but also say, look, theaters get limited 2-week release, and it's up to you. You choose. So I'm just saying, like, I prefer my superheroes on the big screen. So
Yeah.
by the time this comes out, we'll hopefully all be back out again, breathing the same air. I don't know. Doing
that remains to be seen.
I can't stay at home forever. Well, it's pretty much all back open again now here, thank God. Anyway, we won't talk about COVID. We will, in fact, stop talking about this, and we will be back in a moment.
Let's get nerdy, everybody. I'm Chris.
And I'm Dave, and together we are the Nerd By Word, your podcast guide through the nerd multiverse.
Our podcast takes deep dives into all sorts of nerdy content. We talk about comic books, video games, movies, TV, and pop culture.
Want to know about the latest nerdy news? We've got you covered.
Want to get recommendations about new or obscure media that will fill your nerdy heart with happiness? You've come to the right place.
And in our Nerd Big Talk segment, we go deep as we take on some of the biggest questions in nerddom. All that and exclusive interviews with heavy hitters in the nerd world.
Join us on the Nerd By Word wherever you get your podcasts and nerdbyword.com. Stay well and stay nerdy.
And we're back. So welcome to our review part of the show, where we are reviewing Crossover Volume 1, Kids Love Chains, which is issues 1 to 6. The graphic novel was actually released, collected on the 1st of June this year. It's written by Donny Cates, and the art is by Jeff Shaw, Dee Cunniffe, and John Hill. And it stars a variety of new characters and some characters that you may already know.
Quite a few that you may be familiar with.
It's published by Image Comics, so some of these other characters may be more associated with other Image Comics characters, but we'll jump into that. So Crossover, in summary, is kind of like every fanboy's dream of seeing of yourself injected into a medium and interacting with characters that you like. And there's a big event that happens, and we cover that in the first issue. There's an event that happens in the real world which pulls fictional characters in, and although Donny Cates references characters like Superman, obviously we don't see any Marvel or DC characters,
unfortunately.
And they do a really good job of referencing people like Doctor Strange and Superman and stuff like that. But I would say referencing, they use the name Superman, Doctor Strange, and even there's a point in the issue, we'll talk about that particular character later, but they do a drawing which everybody could assume is a way of them kind of like Superman, but it wasn't Superman.
we get it the dude with the cape, that guy.
So without trying to summarize too much more, what were your sort of initial impressions of Volume 1? Okay,
so like before I jump into that, me and my friends used to play this game with each other all the time. Like, it would always start off with, what would you do if you're walking down the street and like all of a sudden the Ghostbusters appeared in front of you? Like, random stuff like that.
Oh, I used to do that. Like,
what
would you do if zombies came out of the ground? Like when we were kids, we'd so my parents have got a caravan, like one of those static caravans. Probably heard me mention it before. And we'd like me and my brother and some of our friends would be allowed to hang outside the caravan late at night, like, because even
that sounds like trouble.
No, like, well, because it was right outside the caravan, so our parents could kind of like open the curtain occasionally and check we were outside, even at like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, even when we were like 14 or something like that, because it was like a holiday home, and so we obviously, when you're like 13, 14, you're not talking about when you went out drinking, you're like, you say, you're talking about stupid stuff like it was always like, what would you do if, like, what would you do if, like, but sorry, I'm jumping on your story, but but
that's what this book reminds me of. This book is literally felt like playing that game with my friends. It's like, what'd you do if like you're just walking through downtown and all of a sudden a freaking portal opened up and every freaking superhero you've ever known comes through this portal? Like, what?
Do you know what it made me think of? Was Last Action Hero.
Yes, I love Last Action Hero.
Yeah, it made. I thought about it more towards the end of the 6-issue arc. But no, for me, I thought this 6 issues was actually really well written. I thought Donny Cates, though, I've heard him in other interviews talk about being a fan of comics and now being a writer of comics. And I've seen him post tweets online and stuff like that, where he's like, years ago I'd be working somewhere and reading comics of X, Y, and Z, and now I'm working with X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, so for me, this felt like the fanboy turned writer has just created. I can imagine that he created this concept well before. I could very well be wrong, but I can imagine that he mentally created this concept well before he became a comic writer.
Oh yeah, at least the skeleton for it, right? Like this, it seems like a gigantic love letter to the comics industry is what this book feels like. Those are my initial thoughts, but like immediately it was just fun because it 100% plays up to that what if kind of feeling. Like, what if something like this did happen? What if there was a dome over the city where you lived in and you couldn't get out? Like
yeah. Well, I mean, there was that TV show Under the Dome. Like, it got worse every season.
No, crossover was much better than that.
just a side note, how much of that did you watch?
One episode. That was enough.
Really? I watched it all. I watched the whole thing.
Mark,
like
you
all
watch
3 seasons.
Everything. Do you ever just like quit on something? Like, I'm over it. I'm done.
There's a load of shows that are stacking up now. I'll be honest. I seem to have got really busy this year. I've fallen behind of at least 10 shows that I regularly kept up with. I keep thinking, how am I going to catch up with those? This is actually the first year ever, I think, in my life where I actually have fallen behind with so many things.
That's because you got a podcast to keep you busy now.
But that actually could be a big part of it.
Yeah.
So, but I have been known like to not quit stuff.
Yeah.
But I also equally, like, I said this to you before, like, I'll watch stuff knowing it's rubbish, but I'm like, but I actually equally enjoy it, but I know it's rubbish.
No, that's a different feeling. It's different to be like, this show is garbage, I cannot wait to watch it, versus like, I hate this show, but I'm gonna watch it anyway.
There was that Noah, whatever his name is,
Noah Wiley?
the guy, Noah Wiley from ER did that.
The Librarians.
No, I haven't seen that. The sci-fi show where the aliens invaded.
I can't remember the name of it. It was on TNT.
Yeah. It lasted like 5 years or something.
Yeah.
That was just got more and more horrendous every season. And I was like, but even my wife walking and see me watching, go, why are you watching this? I'm like, oh, it's so rubbish. Like, but I literally like.
You couldn't stop.
But I couldn't wait to tune in each week. I was like, I've got to watch it. Anyway, we've gone way off topic, right? Okay, so like I say, this whole thing is like a fanboy's dream. Yeah. This whole concept, like, I mean, how he pitched this and the love. I think he's only been able to make this work because he's been in the industry quite a while now, Donny, and he's obviously built up a network of relationships with like Jeff Lemire and Mark Miller, and you could see it as it's going on, and Mark Silvestri and everyone. He's clearly built a really good relationship with people to be able to make this project work. The only way this project was really ever going to work was the ability to be able to pull in known branded
other people's characters.
Yeah. And obviously we knew that was going to be limited to indie creations, so it was unlikely that he was ever going to get Marvel, DC, or even people like Valiant Comics. They're not going to stick their branded characters in this image book. But there is enough indie concepts out there that you probably will be able to pull in some characters. And we've seen that as we go on. So anyway, what did you think worked as throughout this first volume?
I think that what you just said is exactly what worked. Like, Donny Cates has been around long enough where he is friends with these people, and they trusted him enough to lend their characters to this story. And I feel like a lot of times when you're creating characters, they're sort of personal to you. So the thought of turning them over to someone else is kind of like, I don't know about that, even if they're just borrowing them for an event. So I think that's probably the best part, is that all the cameos and all of the references, none of it is nuanced, but it is very, very specific to comic book fans. Because even if you've never read some of these characters, like I had no idea who Madman was, never heard of Madman before I opened this book. But I know who Chip Zdarsky is. I know who Robert Kirkman is. Like, so when I flip to the pages and they're like, oh, Chip Zdarsky was murdered, or oh, Robert Kirkman is still missing. And it's just kind of like, you get that giggle while you're reading it because you're like, I know who that is. So like what works is that this is kind of not just Image Comics, but it is kind of like an industry inside joke. At the same time, that is probably my beef of what doesn't work, because if you are not like, if you don't read a variety of comics, not just like, oh, you know, I love comics, but I only read Spider-Man. But like if you don't read a variety of comics, you're not going to get most of the references in this series at all.
I think in terms of what worked for me actually was Donnie's ability to juggle actually quite a large cast of characters, from the core characters to even the minor characters, even to the characters that sort of got one or two scenes. And I agree with you, actually, the concept of this and just throwing in real cool moments, like in the 6th issue, we the build up from issue 1 to 6 is to get inside the dome, which is fairly clear from the first page, pretty much. So they do in issue 6 get into the dome. So just to cover that off, what happened was when all the comic book characters broke into the real world, there was a bigger all-out fight between the humans of the Earth that they were in and the superheroes, and one of the superheroes decided to put a dome over the superheroes to protect them. And some were outside the dome, some were inside, but within that dome there's also humans, etc. But anyway, so what I thought was a really cool moment was when they got into the dome, just to see like Savage Dragon fighting Witchblade. I was like, I thought that is a pretty cool moment. I was just like, I like that. So I thought, in terms of what worked, it was just juggling that many characters, but also throwing in sort of the surprise moments like that. In terms of
that was really fun though. Like the whole. Also the inside jokes to me were really great. Like when the newscaster says something about Chip Zdarsky still, being murdered or whatever.
Brian K. Vaughan.
Yeah, Brian K. Vaughan got murdered. Sorry. Sorry, Chip. But Chip Zdarsky is still missing, supposedly.
Chip Zdarsky, Scott Snyder, and Robert Kirkman are missing.
Right. But it was just funny because it's like the Otto, who's one of the main characters in the book, he's the owner of the comic shop that ends up getting blown up in the first issue. But he, like, anytime someone mentions Brian K. Vaughan and they say, oh, he was a writer for Marvel, and Otto gets so pissed and he's like, do you only remember him writing on Marvel? What about all the other stuff that he's written? And I just thought that was so funny because, like, every time I think of Brian K. Vaughan, I clearly think Saga. Which is an Image book, but it's hilarious the amount of inside jokes like that they have spread throughout this series.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, I think probably my only real criticism of the book would be, I would say it's worse in the first 3 issues than the second 3 issues. So the first 3 issues, I found the book to be quite wordy. Like there was, I felt like there was probably
a lot of explaining.
I would probably say that even bordering on info dumping, like, and actually he kind of almost puts it like that, like going, let me explain, and kind of jumps in, when we jump into the whole God Country characters and the sword, he goes, right, hold on, and then just jumps into sort of 2 or 3 pages of telling you about it. And I get that he has to do that because not everybody who's picked up Crossover has read God Country, has read all the other sort of associated characters that are in there. And I was it the ones I'm thinking of, the Paybacks, which I'd never even heard of before this. I had obviously heard of the variety of others. Obviously I know who Witchblade is. I love Witchblade. I'd had heard of God Country, but never read God Country. I have read Black Hammer, the first volume. I haven't carried on with that. Clearly I knew who Hit Girl was, I did know who Madman was, but there's a lot of people, like you say, you didn't know who Madman was. I didn't know the Paybacks were. So those kind of information dumps, I guess, are helpful. But equally, there's just so much.
There are parts in this first volume where that gets a bit overwhelming because the characters are talking, but also he's talking at the same time. So it gets confusing at some parts because you've got all of these thought bubbles and you're like, okay, I know his thought bubbles are in yellow and they're square, and then their thought bubbles are white, but like there's way too much happening all at once. And so there especially I think in like issue 2 and 3, there were definitely a lot of parts where I had to go back and like reread a few pages, like go back a few pages and then kind of with what I was reading.
I did read the first 3 issues twice actually, so but moving on from that, who's your favorite character of this first volume?
I don't want to say. Okay, no. So Ellie definitely is my favorite character, but I really also like Ryan. I like the preacher's son. Which
but I think that's deliberate though.
But like, yeah, I mean, I like him.
But who doesn't have a good redemption arc, right? Like,
well,
he's not almost there. He's on the cusp of it by the time volume 1 finishes.
Right.
So,
but I guess I shouldn't say that I like him specifically, but like I like that character because he's just so doofy. Like he's such a doofus, kind of just aloof and unaware, and basically he's completely useless. But I still think like he's hilarious to me. Like just he just is such like a I don't even know what to say, like a misfit. I get a kick out of him just for comic relief, I guess. So but as far as like actually a character that's actually got to meet, definitely Ellie. I mean, it's hard not to like Ellie.
Yeah, I would say my favorite character is Ellie.
Yeah,
I loved the whole setup of her as the cosplayer and the setup, the story. Lost her parents and they even do a bit of a flashback.
Yeah, and
then I mean, how it ends, we'll talk about it. I think we'll just say there was a twist about her character, but we'll talk about it when we come to the end of the review about the end. And then that twist, I was like, okay, I'm so bought into this character. Like I loved her already. A part of me did keep getting annoyed by her running around in cosplay. I've got to be honest. Like I was a bit like, I did think because there was a point where when they're all on the road and they obviously didn't want to get caught with actual comic book characters. I thought, come on, man, dressing as a cosplay character, just take it off. This is obviously the point where you should really like try and blend in. Dressing as a cosplayer is not blending in. Like that was probably the only little bit of that I didn't like. But in terms of a least character for me, actually, it was the preacher's the preacher, Father Lowe. I honestly, it annoys me, and I've seen this so much in media where they take a Christian leader or pastor and turn him into some sort of evil nut job with psychotic tendencies, and it's just unnecessary, and it's so been done so many times before. It's not an original idea. It's probably one of the least original ideas in this whole concept. I've got a good idea, let's get a preacher and turn him into a psycho. We've seen it. It's been done so many times. Like, I'm not saying I've got a brilliant idea of how we could rectify that, but I just felt like it's something that I thought we could have taken a different angle on. Like, I've seen it so much. The Christian pastor suddenly hates all these people and wants to burn them down and thinks it's acceptable to kill people, because no genuine pastor would ever do that. Like, they wouldn't. Like, no one that ever believes in.
But I think that's the point, though, right? Just to show how far off the path they are.
Well, yeah, they are extremely off the path. Like, if you obviously the message of any religion is love, and therefore, obviously I'm a Christian. I know that the message is love, but it doesn't mean you then suddenly start trying to you only put that bracket of love around a certain group of people, but anyone outside that group, we are going to burn those people. Like, so, and that I was like, no, man, I hate this guy. I don't know. Well, hate's a strong word. Like I intensely dislike this character. What about you?
I don't like him either, but I think as great as some of his one-liners are, Otto is probably one of my least favorites. Just because he's almost just like generic. Like,
it was generic.
I understand that that's the point of the character, but as such, like it was kind of like, oh, I don't really care. Like, other than your one-liners about like the meta stuff, you really don't bring much to this story.
And obviously we don't need to go into too much detail here, but shock favorite character guest star from a known franchise, like that you just was like, oh wow, like who did you love showing up?
Literally one tiny panel in the 6th book, but as I was flipping through, I was like, oh my god, it's Lucy from The Wicked and the Divine. Lucy is Lucifer from The Wicked and the Divine, and I just got such a kick out of that because she's just kicked up like on a brick wall, and she's like, oh honey, you ain't seen nothing yet. Like, yes, I love it.
There's so many. There was it on that double page shot where Witchblade and Savage Dragon are fighting. To be honest, they threw in so many characters, and I did recognize quite a few of them. Not all of their names I knew, but for me, the character I loved the most seeing show up was Hit Girl from Kick-Ass. And when it turns around and says, I'll take it from here, and then Eddie goes, holy shit, that's Hit Girl. and they're all like, yeah, holy shit, like, and one of them was it Otto goes, this is the best day of my life. I actually love that whole thing, and it's just one, it's actually just one page, 2 panels, 2 panels she's on, 1 page, but I was like, man, I love this. And I thought, man, Donny Cates knows some people, he's got Hit Girl in here now. But I thought that was a really cool moment. But what did you think overall of the 6 issues in terms of the structure and how it was written and how it was put together?
As far as structure goes, to tell this kind of story that brings in characters from an entire publisher's catalog, I don't think that there was another way you could have told this story. I just don't see how this could have worked another way. So as far as the structure goes, it's fine. But again, because the depth of characters is so big, it really does force you to kind of stop and pause and go back and make sure that you have understood what is happening before you like move on to the next sort of story arc. So it took a little bit longer to get through, but it didn't feel like a slog. Like, well, that's not true. I think it sort of drags just a tiny bit in the 2nd issue, but I think that's just sort of the 1st issue ends on literally this like big explosive thing, and then the 2nd issue is just kind of, okay, now we're meandering about and doing stuff and gathering up things to move on to the next area. So it just it was not a great follow-up in terms of action. It really like killed the pace of the end of the 1st book, but then it immediately picks up again. So
I thought in terms of the writing, I do agree. There was points around 2 and 3 where I was like, oh, it's just quite tough to get through. But I think because he wanted to do so much in the 1st volume, he had a goal of, I need to introduce a load of characters,
right,
and also kind of cover off a whole load of stuff that happened before we picked up issue 1. And I also need a climax for my 1st volume of getting to that dome and what happened there. Obviously we know that beyond that, we're going to go into the 2nd part of the story from issue 7 onwards, but he had a lot to cover in 6 issues. He had to create a core cast of characters. He clearly, obviously, with an event called Crossover, about a crossover, he couldn't have really, if he'd have had this book, a crossover without any known characters, it probably wouldn't have been as good. It was good to pull in all these random characters from other people's IP and bring them all in, like you say, and people trusting him to do that.
Well, those are just the people he named. There's a scene where they're in that prison, and you can clearly see Batman is behind bars, Wonder Woman is behind bars. Like, you can see that these iconic characters are in the book, but obviously they just cannot be named and we can't see their faces, but like you can't mistake the silhouette of Batman. So
I know. I know there, like I said, there was a lot of reference to the big 2, which he was very clever about. And clearly they haven't sued him yet because it's still coming out. So, but also he has relationships with people, so I'm assuming they're generally going to be left alone. But I did think he structured it as well as he could with what he wanted to do to make this actually. It was wordy, but also action packed and fairly fast.
Yeah, but I think it has to be wordy, like you said, because you have to give everyone a fair chance, right? All of your readers, not just veteran like Image readers. So in order to get that much information across, you have to drop enough like inside information that fans will appreciate, but you also have to drop enough information that someone who is picking this up for the first time will still be able to follow the story and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Not obviously not as much as a fan, but still be able to enjoy it. So I think probably when he gets to issue 7 and beyond, it's going to take on a different tone, because if you've got a whole volume ahead of you, I think you don't have to do as much exposition, because now you can just get down to it and hope that people have at least read some part of the first volume before they dive into volume 2. So
I wouldn't recommend going into volume 2 without reading volume 1. But no, I thought overall, it was actually quite a humorous book as well, and
I definitely laughed out loud several times.
There were several moments, yeah, like it felt fresh as well. I felt like, so there's a part in terms of talking about the writing and the structure. What I loved, actually, there was a point in issue 6. So if you think about it, Donnie did narrate this whole book, and it wasn't sort of in my mind consciously thinking Donnie was narrating, but there was a point where, I did think to it, Donnie is obviously narrating, but there's a point where the words are fading. Yeah, that was it. It's on the second page of issue 6, and he's like, "I'm in control," whatever, and it's like, and what I thought was that was quite almost like a fourth wall break between issue 6 and us, like the actual reader. So I liked that Donnie actually did that, and then the rest of the issue, it has no narration. The narration's completely taken away, because Ellie's kind of gone off book to whatever.
Right, because once she handled the sword, then she could start, she had like this sort of cosmic moment where she could see the future and the past and the present and all of these other things. And I thought that was a brilliant way to kind of direct the 6th book, or to wrap up this first volume. Because like as soon as it starts happening, I was like, is someone else going to come in? Or at first I thought it was Valifax, which is the sword. I thought the sword itself was kind of taking over the story. And then eventually you realize like Ellie now has control of this story.
Yeah,
but it was fun to read that when he's like, "What is happening? That's not how this is supposed to go."
Yeah. So he's like, and then you can see the words fading completely, and then the rest of issue 6 is not narrated, which I thought actually that's really cool. Like that obviously Donny Cates is the writer, and this isn't real life, but I like the fact that he's kind of taking that twist that actually, no, this is real now. Like that's that kind of. I thought that was a really cool moment, and in terms of the sort of structure again, the flashbacks and the info dumps, they were completely, like, I agree with you, they were completely necessary, although it was a lot of information. If without those, though,
it wouldn't have been the same.
It would have been like, well, imagine suddenly Madman just showed up and you were expected to know who Madman was, and you probably and everyone's, oh my god, it's Madman, and also the Valifax, the sword, and everyone's like, imagine if you got Valifax without that background, you probably wouldn't care as much, but also you'd be completely it'd be like reading the first issue of Death Metal, and but at least with this, like, you actually did have that info in here. Like if Death Metal had taken this approach, where every time they introduced a new concept, they actually said, "Oh, hello, Mr. Reader, let me just borrow your time for another page, because we're just going to tell you what this particular thing means," which Death Metal didn't do. Death Metal, like
well, they did. They came out with some kind of guide, but it came out 3 issues after. It's like,
who cares? And but even if Crossover had, say, released a guide after four issues, and even if it was a separate thing you had to pick up, like Crossover, the guide, I'd be like, no, I don't want to pick that up. I want to read the actual main book. I don't want to go and read like these one shots.
But I think that's part of what makes this so great. It's like, you don't have to do that. They took this massive concept with a gargantuan cast of characters, and they made it work in 6 issues without you having to go and do any research whatsoever.
Although I do want to now. I want to read God Country, and I'm not overly bothered about the paperbacks, but I would wouldn't say no if it was in front of me. I don't think I'm going to go and buy it, but God Country is something I'm keen to read. So the art, because obviously there's no comic that's complete without the art. So what did you think?
I love the colors. It was so vibrant, and I thought that the way that they differentiated the comic characters from the quote unquote real world characters was that the comic characters were kind of drawn like, you know, mid-century pop art style, where they had like the polka dots in as their skin instead of like a flat skin tone.
Oh yeah, I love the polka dot thing.
Yeah, so I thought that that was a really kind of unique way to do it, especially I say that because like I think even people who don't read comics understand and recognize like pop art. So I think drawing the comic characters in that different style helps, you know, non-familiar readers kind of be able to differentiate who is from reality and who is from the portal. So
yeah, I know, I agree. I absolutely love the artwork, and I mean, yes, you can kind of, so with a superhero, you know, it's a superhero like Savage Dragon and Witchblade. They didn't do the polka dot thing, but we know those are comic book superheroes,
right? But they're inside the dome too.
Yeah, they're inside the dome, so maybe it's slightly different or something inside the dome. But equally outside of the dome, a lot of the people you came across were superheroes, whether they had the polka dots or not. They were dressed in a way like they were dressed in some sort of costume, and they weren't cosplayers, they were superheroes. So the only people is that the small girl, I've forgotten her name, Ava, the little girl who had the fiery eyes. She obviously is the first character we meet with the polka dots, and to hide her polka dots, they cover her up in normal makeup. But anyway, I really enjoyed the art. I think the colors are amazing, and I think there's so many great double page shots, and even the way Madman was drawn I thought was just so good.
I think it's great. Like they pay so much attention to detail, so even like the big battle sequences are just like big battle sequences that you read in the big two books, you know. Like I don't think that, but I think that that's all part of the point, and I think that's what makes it work. It's that when you're reading crossover, you are never ever taken out of superhero like fandom, so to speak, or comic fandom. So even when it gets super meta, and I think it's hard to get meta right in a book. I think it's much easier to present that concept in TV and film. I mean, just look at Deadpool. But to get the concept right in writing, I think that takes something special, and I think that's probably my favorite aspect of the entire series so far. It's meta without being overly in your face. Like, you know, the worst thing you could do in writing is like you flip a page and then it's like some random dude in a dirty white t-shirt that's like, oh hey, I'm the guy that's writing this book right now, and it's like, okay, we didn't really need that. We can gather that that's what's going on. We don't need that drawn into the book.
I was going to say though, you know how most of the superheroes are, like you say, bright and colorful. There are some really dark scenes as well, like with the guy, the superhero who actually explodes later on, but when the scene where he's chained up is really dark and grisly, where the father, the preacher, Father Lowe, he's been beating him, and he's in some sort of basement and drinking, and that's actually really dark. Like the coloring is completely different. It's those couple of pages completely take a different turn. So I think the art was handled really well. I really enjoyed the art. I'm glad it was, I'm glad that we didn't. Sometimes when you're reading these comics, artists can't necessarily keep up with the writing, and you might get every fifth issue or something like that it's by a different artist. It's okay if it's within a different story arc, but the first 6 issues obviously were one story, so it was really good that we had the same team for the whole 6 issues. So no, I really love the art. Big fan of it, and I think it really works. And do you know what, actually, I can't even can't even get away with not mentioning this. The covers as well, just so
Oh,
good.
yeah.
Like issue 4, where it's actually ripping out the page and you see them all charging forward. I loved issue 1 where the comic is actually exploding in the face.
Yeah.
And I actually did manage to pick up a variant cover for issue 3 in which Spawn is sitting behind Ellie, and that's actually illustrated. That's actually illustrated by McFarlane. And
Really?
I had to get that. I had to get that cover. So. But anyway, so to sort of come to an end on our review here, what did you think of the ending of Volume 1?
I had, for those of you that have watched Friends, the episode where Ross and Rachel sort of break up again after that 18-page front and back letter.
Oh, yeah.
And Rachel is like, oh, by the way, it doesn't happen to every guy and it is a big deal. And then Chandler comes out of nowhere and he's like, I knew it. So as soon as it's revealed about Ellie at the end of the book, I literally stood up from my chair and screamed, I knew it. I started to get suspicious. First of all, in the very first issue, when she was like, my parents are in the dome. Well, why are your parents in the dome? I mean, I know that they still had regular people in the dome when everything opened, but that made me suspicious. And then when she put the makeup on Ava, and she was so good at hiding the makeup on Ava, I was like, I think you're too good at that. And I think something is going on here. And sure enough, at the very end, I was like, I knew it. I knew she was a comic book character.
I'll be honest, I didn't even suspect it. Didn't even think about it. Like, I think because she had such a good relationship with Otto, and obviously she was quite embedded in the real world, it just didn't occur to me. So she's obviously I think it's going to be interesting to find out what happened. Like, who is Ellie? Like, is Ellie a character from an existing franchise? Is it from something that Donnie's done, or is it, I don't know who.
Is it
Ellie,
something coming up?
Coming up, or is it that? Is it another comic book creator's creation? Like, I'm interested to see where Ellie comes from, and but I like the fact that obviously she comes out and says my parents aren't from Denver and has that sort of pop art.
She's got the polka dots.
Polka dots, short yellow hair, but also wearing an Invincible t-shirt, which he wasn't in it, but like that was his kind of little guest thing. And and so I was like, oh wow. So
and there's also a couple of characters that they introduced, that shady military guy, Pendleton. I really want to know what kind of deal he has with the government, why he's after the preacher. Well, the preacher's a terrible guy, but still, why is he after the preacher? Why did he approach the preacher's son to kind of bring him into what's going on? So they dropped a lot of like unique stuff that was new for this story, that I'm definitely interested in seeing where a lot of this goes. So, I mean, am I going to pick up issue to issue? No, I won't, because I really enjoyed reading all of this at one time. So once volume 2 is done, I'm definitely picking up volume 2 of Crossover.
Yeah, I think initially I was like, okay, I'm just going to read the first volume, and then when the cliffhanger dropped that Ellie was actually a comic book character, I was like, oh, okay, I want to know what happened. I've got to come back, haven't I? But also when they get Ava, so in the middle of the dome, there's this portal that can take characters back to where they came from, and there's also something they alluded to, that it could be that humans go the other way. So I am wondering whether our preacher's son, Orion, is it Orion, isn't it? Whether he, Orion, whether he also will go into this portal, and whether, because obviously there's this sort of prophecy for him, and I'm wondering if there's something that leads to him. And I didn't suspect that I never suspected that she was some sort of superhero, so I did think to myself, is Ellie going to go in the portal, which is clearly what she wanted to do, but obviously got knocked out before she could get through the portal. So I imagine now she wants to get back in the dome. I'm really interested to find out what's happening, what's going on. Like, I want to pick up volume 2. It's not out yet. Obviously, issue 7, it says at the back, which I thought was quite unique. Donny Cates actually handed over issue 7 just as a one-off to Chip Zdarsky and Phil Hester and Andy Parks. So I thought that was quite a unique take. And actually the front cover for issue 7 is that Chip Zdarsky's still missing. So it's going to be very meta that Chip Zdarsky's writing a story about himself being missing, which is just crazy. Whoever gets to do that, write about yourself in a comic book. So
yeah, and I think that's the kind of approach you have to take with something like this. Like, you got to have fun with it. I mean, you just have to have fun with it. So I did have fun reading it. It was a little wordy. Some parts were a bit of a drag to get through, but again, they sort of corrected themselves very quickly, and overall I really, really enjoyed Crossover.
I think, like you, I'd be keen to read it collected.
I think actually we covered this. I want to say it was episode 23. Yeah,
read the first issue.
It was episode 23. We covered the first issue, and in that episode we both had said that we wanted to find out what else happened, and I think for the most part, this definitely kept the expectations that I had set after that first issue. I was not disappointed, not with any of the people who died, not with the way that the story went, not with the big reveal at the end. Like, it just, I wouldn't say that, oh my God, I loved this book. Like, I'm not going to fawn over this book, but I mean, I just really enjoyed it. It's such a fun read.
So how would you rate the writing of this book?
Writing, I would give the writing a 4.
And the art?
Art, I'd actually give art like a 4.5.
Yeah, I actually quite feel the same for once. I don't want to argue too much with you this week.
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy with a 4. I would probably go in with a 4 myself, actually. And yeah, the art, actually, in honesty, I'd probably, I'd go for 4.5 out of 5. So I'm quite happy. I think the art was actually really good. And the story, I mean, the only thing about the writing was just a little bit too much information, but other than that, I felt that Donny handled this really well.
Yeah,
it was a really well structured book and really well written, very good humor, and good use of controlling multiple characters. So yeah, I'm quite happy with a 4 out of 5. And but the main thing is, I think we're both keen to see what happens next. So
yeah,
bring on volume 2.
All right.
So on our next episode, we'll be starting the first of our regular conversations and speaking to the one and only Rockin' Robbie Billups of the Pop Culture Philosophers YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah. And don't forget, we did start a second podcast series where we tackle some of the most essential graphic novels of all time. Our 9th Late to the Party Book Club episode was Persepolis by Marjan Satrapi. That episode dropped mid-August. And our next book club is going to be the first 2 volumes of Y: The Last Man.
You can follow us on social media everywhere. Geeks Unleashed is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So please give us a like, a comment, a share, a follow, a like, whatever, you know.
And then you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcast: Google, Podbean, Apple, Spotify. We are everywhere. So be sure to give us a 5-star review and tell your geeky friends.
Thank you for listening. Good journey.
Good journey.